This episode is sponsored by all the generous people that are on the Patreon feed for the Life Shift podcast. Thank you so much for supporting the production of the show. As you may or may not know, I do everything myself so far. And so this contribution to the production costs and software costs and hardware costs and all those things are so helpful. So thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in directly supporting the Life Shift podcast, you can head to patreon.com/the Life Shift podcast. And there you can learn more about how to support the show. So thank you so much. And here is this week's episode.
Snowball effect, right? Because you get to that moment, it's not a passive or arbitrary thing or a small thing. It's a big deal to get to that point. Because for me, it was stepping away from 10 years plus worth of relationships and friendships and people who felt like family, like truly felt like family, knowing that there was going to be a big time rejection and I'd have to step away. I'd have to give up my ordination. I wouldn't be able to help people the way I was helping people. I'd lose income from what I was doing there as well. There was all these kind of other factors that I had to bear in mind before making my decision. You start to realize that a lot of what you'd kind of been told about the world, so non-Christians, just isn't quite true. And so all these kind of things I had believed started to not make sense or ring true anymore. And I was dealing with my own sexuality. When I say dealing with it, just kind of coming to terms with it, trying to experience it, figure out what it was. Was this just the devil trying to attack me, take me out the equation, blah, 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 blah? Or was this actually who I was? And it got to the point where I was fasting, so stopping myself eating. I was crying myself to sleep or like at night because I just wanted God to change who I was. Going through conversion therapy, having people try to cast demons out of me, all of this sort of stuff to try and get rid of this gay thing. And there was one moment I was staying at my parents' house and I cried myself to sleep the night before. I got up in the morning.
This week's guest is Lewis Crompton. He is truly a remarkable individual who's kind of transformed his life from this really strict religious community that he loved to a journey of personal freedom and self-discovery. In this conversation, we talk about his life experience moving into this rigid belief system and fully embracing that environment and feeling like he was doing great work and helping so many people, and how he was able to fully embrace his identity moving out of that space and into a new version of his life. Really, truly, maybe for the first time, feeling like he was living with full authenticity and full freedom in who he was. Intertwined within his story, Lewis shares how he built this supportive financial trading community and a space where individuals are really truly empowered to achieve financial freedom and personal growth and building that community together. So, whether you're navigating your path or simply seeking inspiration, I think Lewis's story will resonate with you. I really enjoyed this candid conversation with Lewis Crompton, and I hope you do too. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Lewis Crompton. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Lewis. Hello, Lewis.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining. We were talking a little bit before recording, and I'm always just so honored that people that I've never met are willing to have a personal conversation on the Life Shift podcast. And really the goal is that there's someone out there, or there are multiple someones out there that maybe feel alone in their circumstances. And by hearing people's stories and how they overcame certain things or how they found the internal fire to do whatever they may do, those kind of things make them feel a little less alone. And then they can kind of move through those moments. And it's really my goal. So thank you for just wanting to be a part of this experiment that I'm doing.
It's a pleasure. It really is.
Well, just for anyone listening, if you haven't heard the show before, it's the first time listening because Lewis is on, welcome. But also this show stems from my own personal experience. When I was 8 years old, my mom was killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment in time, my parents were divorced, lived multiple states apart. I was visiting my dad. My dad had to sit me down and tell me that that happened. And at that moment, everything in my life was changed. I lived with my mom full time. So I was going to have to move to a different state, live with my father, go to a different school. Life was going to be quite different. And it was the time period when a lot of people weren't talking about mental health. They weren't talking about a grieving 8-year-old child. They were just like, let's push it under the rug. He will adapt. He'll go forward. And in that time of grief, I really felt alone. I felt like there was no one else out there that had a similar experience. I think logically I knew, but I think emotionally I felt very alone. And so that's really why this show exists, because I want those other people, like I was mentioning, to feel less alone and know that there is hope, and then know that they're not the only person that's ever gone through something and overcome or moved through. So that is a little bit of why the Life Shift podcast exists. It's just, I know a lot of people have lots of life shift moments, but that particular one really started everything for me. So a little bit about that. So before we get into your story, Lewis, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are 2024. Like what
Yeah.
does your life look like these days?
Well, I wish I was still 24. That'd be great. Unfortunately, I'm 35, so unfortunately, it's still quite young, really, isn't it? So, not going to complain. So, I'm 35 years old. I live in the UK, originally born and bred in London. I then left London. I mean, I've lived all over the place, traveled all over the place, lived in New York for a little bit of time as well, which chewed me up and spat me out. And then,
Probably not the only one.
no, I don't think I. And yeah, moved back to the UK, lived in North London for a bit, then end up in East London for a few years before deciding city life was not for me anymore. I wanted peace and quiet and space. So I moved into the middle of nowhere in the countryside in the UK, and I love it. Absolutely love it. So, yes, 35 years old, living in the middle of nowhere. I run a company which empowers other people with the ability to trade financial markets safely and profitably, using a methodology that I kind of created over the past 10 years of my own trading, that if they're UK based is tax free, which we love. Unfortunately, in other parts of the world, it's not tax free, but it does only take 30 minutes a day and it's low risk and high reward. So I absolutely love what I do. We've got a global community who are all just so supportive. They want to see each other do well, want to see each other succeed. And yeah, just having a great time doing that.
That's awesome. Do you feel more like a business owner, a teacher, or an investor?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. Which one? I definitely feel when you run your own business that you wear multiple hats every single day. I probably say I feel out of all of those, the one I feel the least like as an investor, because the style of trading and investing I do is only 30 minutes a day. So I only have to have that hat on for 30 minutes. So then I probably lean more into teacher slash business owner slash someone just desperately trying to keep the wheels on in every area of their life as best as they possibly can.
Well, you're not alone in that either. I think there's a lot of people that are trying to do that, but the way you describe it, it sounds like you really enjoy it, and that
Yeah.
like, and I would imagine that the nice piece to that is that community that you've created, and to know that you've created that, and to like live in that and help people feel safe or financially stable. I bet is a nice little extra
Yeah,
reward for you.
and I think definitely, even this morning, I woke up just really full of gratitude for the community, and I messaged them all, not individually because that would take forever, but collectively. When you grow a community, yes, I set it up. Yes, I'm technically the figurehead. I'm leading it. All of those things, but you can't do it without good people. And they are such good people. Every single one of them brings something to the table, brings something to the equation, makes us who we are as a community. So, yes, sometimes I have to play the leader card of that's not acceptable, this is acceptable, encourage the good behaviors, like manage the bad behaviors. And sometimes you get hate for that, not necessarily from within our community, but yeah, it's definitely not always easy. It can be very, very stressful. It can end up being a lot of hours, but I do ultimately love what I do, because what I do comes from a sense of mission. It's not about the business making money, although businesses have to make money to survive. It's about what the business does and what it brings to people and what that community has empowered. And I want to pick up on the word safety, because that's something which is super important to me, to make people feel safe, make them feel peaceful. Yes, we're teaching them financial skills, but within the community, we have to make them feel safe and comfortable. And that's why we behave the way we behave. We have a certain set of values that I hope allow people to feel safe and brave to try to do things, to share things, which I suppose all comes down to psychological safety as well as financial safety.
Well, it sounds like you're providing that, and I think that sometimes we lean into that more based on our own personal experiences or times when we didn't feel safe or we didn't feel like we belonged. And I think I talked to a lot of people that have created communities because of situations in their own lives. So curious to see if, as we talk today, if part of your life story kind of maybe planted those seeds along the way to do what you do. So before we get into it, or as we get into it, maybe you can kind of paint the picture of what your life was like leading up to kind of the moment that we're going to talk about today, this life shift moment. And you can go back as far as you need to, or as close to the moment as you need to, whatever helps paint that picture.
Sure. So I'll see how far I go back. So it was a cold, windy evening. No, I won't go back quite that far. Yeah, I feel like I've lived a lot of lives in 35 years. When I was growing, I grew up in North London. My parents were wonderful people. They were both teachers, so it stands to reason that I've ended up in a teaching world context, just very different to standard education, but still very much teaching and coaching and helping people. They would take me to the local church in order to get into the local primary school. That's kind of what you had to do. But we weren't a particularly religious family. We didn't say prayers at home. We didn't say grace before we ate or anything like that. We weren't we were Christian by name, and that was pretty much it. I do think my dad kind of has a bit of a faith more so than my mum, but very much kind of personal faith and wasn't really talked about. But we would go to church. It was a good place for me to be looked after on a Sunday morning, so they didn't have to look after me. And in the summer holidays, I used to go on church camps as well, which again a good way for my parents to have a bit of time off during their summer holidays because they're both teachers as well, without having to look after me.
It's kind of an expected journey, like where a lot of people like in your community also just going to church because that's just like what everyone did. It was not like drawn to it.
Exactly, yeah. And I think a lot of religions are kind of similar. There's the cultural element of it, and there's the faith element of it. And so I would say culturally, we were probably Christian versus being hardcore faith involved in Christianity. But then as I kind of went into my teen years, I started to latch on to those faith elements more and more and more for myself, kind of at the concern, to be honest, of my parents who weren't particularly that hardcore in their faith. I ended up doing things like street evangelism, faith
Wow.
healings, prophetic stuff, which is basically the Christian word for psychic stuff, and getting more and more involved, heavily involved in a very spiritual side of it, which meant everything became very black and white, right or wrong. You're either making space for God or making space for the devil, that kind of thing.
And you were naturally drawn to this?
Very naturally drawn to it. Yeah, I do think I'm a fairly spiritual person, and I'll explain what happened when I was 18, which opened up other doors of understanding for me. So when I was 18, 19, I trained as a counselor within the church. And there's part of that process where you get your own counseling, your own therapy, and you learn to identify certain concerns that people may have or certain problems that people may be facing through these questionnaires that you give them before you start a session with them. And as I was practicing filling out the form for one of my sessions, I realized I was ticking a lot of certain boxes that, when those boxes were explained to me, highlighted the fact that there was potentially childhood trauma that had happened that I just wasn't aware of. So all the suppressed memory kind of thing. And the reason I go into that is because as those memories started to come out and I started to learn more about trauma and the things that happened to me as well, one of the things I learned about trauma is that it makes you want to seek psychological safety in black and white. So you have super clear boundaries, super clear, this is safe, this is not safe, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. And that boundary line that was drawn for me within the church became very attractive because I didn't have to find that psychological safety for myself. Here was an organization with a lot of very loving, very nice people that I respected telling me this is safe, this is not safe, this is good, this is bad. And so it was very easy and natural for me to buy into that because my brain was so, without me knowing, seeking that psychological safety.
So fascinating to like think back and be able to reflect on that and unpack things and realize that, because I don't think a lot of people do or take the time to. It's interesting to you gravitate towards that. Also, I think someone might, because society also like deemed churches like the safe, good thing to
Yeah.
do, right? Like it was just seen in society like a church can't be bad, right? And so therefore we kind of like feel safe there naturally because of that kind of assumption, I guess. When in reality, any place can be bad and any place can be good, and good, bad people can be inside of all of those places. But I think we kind of naturally, especially if we had trauma and don't maybe not realize it anymore, or we've suppressed it enough, you kind of naturally gravitate towards that. So that's so fascinating that you went there. But I've never really heard anyone say the black and white piece about that, which is really interesting to hear.
Yeah, it is. I read a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Brilliant book. And I basically wept the whole way through it because I was like, this is me. Just identifying all these behaviors that I had, all these kind of self beliefs or self perceptions that I had, which actually all rooted in trauma. I was like, oh, okay, this is something I need to deal with. And I had been dealing with it and working on it from that point, but it was such a brilliant book for helping me see, okay, this is why you're experiencing this. This is how we can move away from it. And even that realization for my personality type is really tricky because I don't like looking at anything or using anything as an excuse for my behavior. I just want to get better or be better, which, funnily enough, is also a trauma response. So it was this kind of catch 22 for me. And it just, one of the very hard lessons was learning to be kind to myself in the midst of that process. And that process is not over, definitely not. So still very much learning to operate from a place of healthy behaviors, healthy responses, healthy reactions versus unhealthy ones.
Yeah, you're not the only person in that circumstance. I think also we're trained to like want to fix things, and sometimes we can't fix things without unpacking other things to then understand those things and how we approach them. It's you mentioned that in this journey of in your teens you were kind of holding on tight to this new world that you were part of, but your parents weren't so excited about that. Was it mainly just because they did weren't as faith based as maybe you were becoming, or were there other warning signs for them?
I think there are other warning signs for them as well. So it was very much this I wouldn't really put down to the fault of the church or at least the church community I was a part of, but it was very intense spiritually because I was deemed as quite gifted in that world. They wanted me to do more, lead more, teach more, speak more, do more coaching and counseling work, that type of thing, over, as it kind of progressed through the years. And so that would inevitably mean I didn't spend as much time with my parents or spend much time with my family. I kind of had this whole world that existed outside of them, which I didn't really want to talk to them about, which I know is a fairly normal teenage thing, but a lot of my behavior is probably quite strange. Like I would go to America at 18 by myself to hang out with all these older Christian people. And my parents just had no idea what was going on over there. Not that anything necessarily was going on that was that bad.
A lot of assumptions can be made, I would imagine, as parents.
A lot of assumptions can be made, yeah, yeah. And it wasn't all good from a psychological perspective or healthy perspective either
Yeah.
for me and who I was.
Well, and I think also, as we said, society said churches are good, but I think society also can say that there becomes this kind of mentality that I don't want to use the word, but a group think that happens, and then people kind of get aligned there. And I can imagine your parents are like, huh, are we losing him? Like, is he going in a path where we're not going to find him again because now he's going to be
Exactly that.
in this space? Yeah. So you kept going down that road.
Kept going down that road, yeah, and it created a lot of separation between me and my parents because we weren't the same. I then was very religious and very spiritual, and therefore felt very separate to them, and then probably very separate to me as well. So I remember we went on holiday to Amsterdam once, and they just middle of the day wanted to walk through the red light district to have a look, just out of curiosity, and I absolutely point blank refused, and I went back to the hotel. I just wouldn't even entertain it because of the level of perceived purity and cleanliness spiritually that I wanted to maintain, which that wasn't in alignment with. So just little things like that. I mean, it wasn't like it was the middle of the night and there was things going on. I just didn't even want to walk through the area because I was so concerned about the spiritual energy that that area would hold.
Was it a fear that you were going to do something wrong, or was it like a true, I can't do that because it's bad?
It's I don't think it was a fear, it was more of a, "That's not a good thing to do," or I'm putting myself in a risky position spiritually, not from thinking I was going to do anything, but just the atmosphere, like, kind of walking through tar. I didn't want to walk through spiritual tar by being in the wrong spiritual area.
Wow. Building, I mean, I could see how that would separate. I think I don't have a strong, I'm not religious and I don't have a super strong faith. And so I always think of it from a different perspective, which sometimes gets me in trouble. But, it's so interesting to hear how dedicated you were. And it just kept going, even though the people you probably love the most were kind of like, what's happening?
Exactly.
How do you move through that? How do you keep that going without losing that?
Yeah, it's very tough, and it does cause separation in relationship. And within the church context I was part of, that was kind of an expected thing to happen because you are different, you're separate, you're holy, which the word holy means set apart for God. Like these are things you're told. So you kind of expect to be separate from the world and not connected in the same way. So it was just kind of part of the course, which again makes it sound potentially cult like.
You
Um,
said it.
yeah, I know that I knew that's the word you're avoiding, but I couldn't say it was a cult, but I can see why people make those parallels. I really can, and a lot of it is the groupthink, and there's not necessarily a particular leader, but the community creates this environment. There's certain beliefs within that community and environment that do very much lead to groupthink and not allow you to think outside of the context you're in.
Does that environment make you does it give you bad feelings about your parents? Bad's not the right word, but does it make you feel like they're not quote unquote good enough because they're not doing certain things in the way that you believe that they should? Or is that separate because they're your parents and your parents are your parents?
I would say with if this is so nuanced, depending on what religious group you're part of. For me, I don't think it was really that, but there was always the concern that they're not saved, quote unquote. So you're always kind of wanting them to be saved, to believe what you believe, to be able to go to heaven, all of that sort of stuff. So there is kind of those elements. If I'm honest, I don't really think I ever worried too much about whether or not my parents were going to be going to heaven or hell. I don't know why I didn't. I just didn't really think about it. Maybe just out of choice, I was like, not going to think about that. But also, I think because my parents did kind of go to church every now and then, I was like, well, they kind of believe enough. So I maybe don't need to worry about that one.
There's a scale. So how do you just keep going down that road? Like, is there a roadblock? Is there like as I in my Netflix mind, it becomes like this snowball effect in which it just gets more intense, more intense, more intense. Is that true? Or do you just kind of navigate this world in that strong faith?
It does kind of snowball. I think so for me, it snowballed to the point over the years where in my early 20s, I end up becoming ordained in the church in America. So I was an ordained pastor. I had a global business, we would call it a ministry, that was helping people, coaching them, counseling them, helping them work through really difficult stuff, which, to be honest, I had no business helping them with. Yes, I do feel like I helped them in some way, some capacity, but very, very intense cases that someone who's in their early 20s without much life experience really I didn't have the emotional resources to handle that or the emotional maturity.
Yeah, probably not good for you either in some way
No,
because you probably
exactly.
absorb some of that.
Yeah. So it wasn't really a healthy place to be. Although I was on the surface handling it and coping with it, it just kind of put a lot of pressure on things. And in my early 20s, that's when I think the cracks started to appear because of everything that I'd been hiding from myself because of my faith and diminishing in myself because of my faith and keeping myself within the boundaries of the good and the bad and the black and the white. That's when it all started to kind of unravel, was in my early 20s.
Mm. Yeah, because do you feel you were creating a person that everyone expected you to be because of that? Or do you think you were still kind of you were just hiding or pushing down, I guess I should say, things that maybe didn't fit in that maybe narrower view?
Yeah, I think I very much felt like me, to be honest.
Okay. But not all of you? Like you weren't
Definitely not
sharing
all of
all
me.
of you
Definitely
with
not all of me, yeah.
okay,
But I've again, it's like when you hang out with certain friends, they bring out a certain part of your personality. Other friends, a
makes
different part of
sense.
your personality. It's not you being a different person, it's just they allow you to reflect back to them certain aspects of who you are. Like certain humor goes down better with certain friends than with other friends. It doesn't mean you're changing as a person. They just bring out those different elements of you. So, and I feel like within the church, I was so on a mission to help people. Then still am on a mission to help people, just in a different way, in a different context. But I was so on a mission to help people. That was the core of me from the age of 18, 19. It's why I trained as a counselor. I just wanted to make people's lives better. And when you're in the the church world and you believe that there is a God, you believe that there is a devil, you do feel like you're in this epic cosmic battle for good and evil. And that is so rapturing, to use a phrase, but it's so consuming and it's so empowering that you just drive forward, you drive forward, you drive forward, even on the difficult days, even when you feel like you're fighting a battle that you can't win, you just keep going, you keep going because you're so consumed by this desire and this mission that is so much bigger than you and bigger than your troubles, bigger than your problems, bigger than whatever you're going through. That is the big thing. That is the important thing. And so I just felt so consumed by this mission that it was very easy to neglect myself. It was very easy to not think about myself too much or to not put myself in too high regard or to worry about my own mental health. I didn't even think about mental health back then or think about who I was. And because of the Puritan nature of that group that I was a part of, you weren't even meant to touch yourself. Definitely didn't look at inappropriate images on the internet or anything like that. Didn't drink, didn't smoke. All of those things were no, no, no. So all those natural parts of your self-discovery and self-development in your mid to late teens, I just had completely shut down, which is why I think as this snowball effect built and built and built, it was in my early 20s that those things started to seep out and come out. And I was trying to then navigate those things in my early 20s, whilst also trying to maintain my faith and trying to maintain my relationships within the church and trying to maintain this business that I built up as well.
Does it become like a game of like hiding, or like with the when the cracks started showing, does it become something where you're now, before you were living this one life and now like there's just like the splintered second element of you that you're not sharing with too many other people? And I can imagine that. Is that what happened?
Oh, it definitely felt very splintered. And again, to layer on top of this, during this phase when I was working in retail and I started learning how to trade, after 7 months, I left my job to trade full time. And it was when I was with that group of people, I was just having the best time. So I was traveling the world, going to places I'd never even imagined I would go to, making good money from my trading, and then also from helping teach other people when I was teaching for a different company for Rich Dad Education. I just had all this stuff going on.
While also as part of the church piece
Yeah,
too?
while still
Oh,
part of the
okay.
church, it was very much felt like I had these 2
And those are
worlds,
different
2
groups.
realities, yeah, and didn't started to feel like I didn't fit into either camp because I was still very much held so true to my faith, so, so true to it and belief in all of that, but then I had all this crazy freedom to no one see what I was doing, no one see what I was up to start exploring all these elements of myself I'd never let myself explore before, and then hating myself for exploring them at the same time. So both camps I didn't really feel like I was fitting into, or I was hiding an element of who I was or downplaying an element of who I was to each of those groups.
In that community, that church community, do you feel like you were the only one in this circumstance, or did you feel that other people were also having these splinters and having these cracks in their facades, or do you feel like you were just alone in that?
I think there's a lot of people who are going through that, and I think particularly as my big life-changing moment of deciding to leave that community behind for the sake of my well-being, mental well-being, was post that, I started to realize how many cracks there were in so many people's facades, especially when I would get hit up for sex by people from that world who probably shouldn't have been hitting me up for that type of thing, if we're honest. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, or should they have, because they're humans, I feel
yeah,
like sometimes we don't see the things that are in front of us because we choose not to, if you will. What made you Was there like a significant something that happened that you were like, I'm done. Like
yes, there
I
definitely
have
was.
to exit.
Yeah, and again, snowball effect, right? Because you get to that moment, it's not a passive or arbitrary thing or a small thing. It's a big deal to get to that point. To because for me, it was stepping away from 10 years plus worth of relationships and friendships and people who felt like family, like truly felt like family, knowing that there was going to be a big time rejection and I'd have to step away. I'd have to give up my ordination. I wouldn't be able to help people the way I was helping people. I'd lose income from what I was doing there as well. There was all these kind of other factors that I had to bear in mind before making my decision. And I think when I was working retail and then traveling with this other group of people, you start to realize that a lot of what you'd kind of been told about the world, so non Christians, just isn't quite true. They are happy. They are content in their life. They have good, healthy relationships. They are loving and good and kind people. Whereas I never really was told that was a thing outside of the church before. And so all these kind of things I had believed started to not make sense or ring true anymore. And I was dealing with my own sexuality. When I say dealing with it, just kind of coming to terms with it, trying to experience it, figure out what it was. Was this just the devil trying to attack me, take me out the equation, blah, 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 blah? Or was this actually who I was? And it got to the point where I was fasting, so stopping myself eating. I was crying myself to sleep or like at night because I just wanted God to change who I was. Going through conversion therapy, having people try to cast demons out of me, all of this sort of stuff to try and get rid of this gay thing. And there was one moment I was staying at my parents' house and I cried myself to sleep the night before. I got up in the morning, my parents were out. I just went to the toilet, sat in the toilet, not to be graphic, not because I needed to do anything. I just was like exhausted. And I we had this phrase in the church, which is always count the cost. And I remember sitting there and I was praying. I was like, God, this doesn't make sense. Like, if this is what you're asking from me, I can't do it. Like, I'm counting the cost and the cost is too much. I just can't do it. And that was the moment sat there in my parents' bathroom that I just said, I'm out. I've got to step away. I can't do this anymore. It doesn't make sense to me that if God is real, that he would want me to be this miserable for this long when I've tried everything I possibly can, like done all the right things to not feel this way, and yet I still do.
The right things, as
Yeah,
we say, yeah. Or what you were told the right things were.
exactly.
I can
Yeah,
imagine, I mean, good for you, first of all, for coming to the place in which you were more important than helping anyone else and all the other things that you had become so happy doing, right? Or telling yourself you were so happy doing, and maybe in some cases you were, but like for choosing you, because I think that's really hard for a lot of people, especially people that are service focused and have been told this is what you need to do. But at the same time, I can imagine how overwhelming that might be, right? Because even though you had started splintering your life and you were doing this trading thing, does it feel like you've lost a huge portion of yourself when you make that decision?
big time. Yeah,
Like, does everything unravel? Like, how do you move through when you feel like now I'm like half a person because that's all I knew?
yeah. I think the reality is by the time I got to that point, I was already in such a constant state of feeling depressed, which had been going on for years. And so that kind of depressed feeling was second nature. It was like, oh, this is how I feel now. And I still think, if I'm honest, I've not broken out of that habit of feeling that way. Don't get me wrong, I don't feel depressed every day like I used to, but I can slip very easily into that type of emotion because there is a grief that comes with that decision. And I think as you get older, you realize every decision you make isn't black and white. There's positive in every decision, there's negative in every decision, there's cost, count the cost. There's cost in every single decision that we make. And that at that point in my life was a massive cost. But I felt like I'd been paying the cost of not making that decision every single day for years. And I just couldn't do that anymore. I just couldn't. So it felt like giving up a massive part of me, and I kind of shut down my spirituality, didn't engage with it, couldn't engage with it for a really long time, and every as the years have rolled on since then, I'm starting to re-engage with my spirituality, but kind of on my terms, not on churchy terms or religious terms, but still wanting to engage with spirituality like I did before, which has been really fun and really healing, but also, to be honest, sometimes really triggering. And then I have to pull away for a bit because it just kind of brings up all this stuff. I was having a therapy session with somebody the other day, kind of a bit holistic style of therapy, and really, really good. Had a couple of sessions, but I've decided not to continue with it because it felt so similar to the type of therapy I used to give when I was in church. And so it's just, I can't engage at this stage in my journey. I can't engage with that type of healing process because it feels too similar to what I used to do. So yeah, there's all this stuff that kind of comes up even years on, which is just an unraveling and trying to reestablish who you are and what you're about now.
But it's nice to have that awareness, right? Like, I feel like, and that freedom to say no more. Like, it's probably easier now, maybe, to say no to the things that aren't serving you in the way that they should, or you feel like they should, or that make you more comfortable. Is that
Well,
true?
to be honest, I was super proud of myself that I said no to any more because they were expecting that I was going to continue. And my brain goes, but they're expecting it. I should give that to them. That's what they want. And I have to work really hard sometimes to be like, no, that's not what you want. Don't do it. But then you get all this stuff of shame and feeling like you're letting people down. So I've gotten a lot better at just being able to say no because I could not say no before.
Do you feel like you were taught that in your space? That like, this is not about you, Lewis. This is about everyone else but you.
I think there definitely is rhetoric and language to that nature. I don't think that was ever necessarily specifically said or communicated. I think that for me probably comes more as a trauma response from previous stuff and being a bit of a peacemaker in general.
Which comes from trauma stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to keep the peace, keep safe.
Yeah.
I
But you
don't
have
want,
more awareness now. So you know when you're being triggered in a space where that could be a trauma response. And now you know how to acknowledge that and move through it
yeah. Yeah. I don't get it right all the time. And then I get
because you're
frustrated.
human.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I feel like when you were mentioning, like you get depressed and it's easy to fall in, I mean, like, I think that's normal. I think that's part of being human. And I think sometimes society, or we have absorb from society, that we're only supposed to have certain emotions, and like certain ones are bad, and certain, like, and
Yeah.
you're going to be sad. You're going to be depressed. You're going to be happy. You're going to be angry. You're going to be all the things because you're a fully formed human being. And hopefully you will have those things. But the important piece is, especially in the way you're describing it, is that like, when you do feel depressed or you feel those moments, you can acknowledge it and you can address it and you can work through it and not shame yourself for it. And like all the pieces that come with having the awareness is just so valuable, because otherwise it's a mess. Like, it's really hard to live through.
Yeah. And if you don't acknowledge it, you can't move through it. And so then it becomes trapped. And that's not good for any of us.
Yeah, or you acknowledge it in quote unquote the wrong way, right? Like for me, it took me about 20 years to properly grieve my mom's death. And for so long, I weaponized the depression or the grief that I had because it was a safety thing for me. It was like, well, if I use it in this way, I'm protecting myself, because I didn't have the awareness yet. It took me like a long time to kind of realize that that 8-year-old version of me was making all the rules, until I like had my breakthrough in my
Yeah.
early 30s. And like looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, like I wasted a lot of time, but at the same time I didn't know better. I didn't have that awareness that we're speaking of, and
Yeah.
I just didn't understand the real value of like acknowledging it and being okay with it and then moving through it and moving past it. So it can become messy.
It can be. Yeah. I think we all have child brains that we need to retrain as our adult versions to handle those things because we didn't know any better at that age. And that's why our brains are trapped in that emotional state and behave from that emotional state. But I'm not an expert on trauma, so I'm going to be quiet now on
Yeah.
that.
No, I mean, I think I think it's important to talk about, especially as guys. I don't think that I think we're getting better at it. I think in 2024, 2025, hopefully it'll get even better. But people are talking about mental health. They're talking about how we're feeling, and we don't have to only be happy or mad. We can have all the emotions. So I think that part of this conversation is super important and super valuable for other people to hear. I am curious though about I won't well, when you were sitting on the toilet and then you made your decision, what does life look like after that? Like, what does that day look like for you? What does that week look like for you? How do you move into this version
Yeah,
of
it
yourself?
was tricky. So in the days that followed, there was a lot of hard conversations that had to be had with people, and the reality of stepping away from the church didn't mean I was stepping truly into my identity at the same time. Those things weren't happening right together at the same time. It took probably about another year after that before I decided to tell my parents that I was gay, and I didn't even do that. I came out as bi because I still wasn't even fully sure myself. I was like, I've not experienced this part of myself, and
That was all shut down for years.
exactly, yeah. So then I did what any person who's been in a very restrictive organization would do is I then went a little bit wild. So I went out and kissed a lot of frogs and had a great time doing that. But doing that just brought all this stuff of shame up. So then I had to start addressing that shame and figuring out all of that stuff as well. And then end up in a relationship which was really toxic. And I used to pin all of that toxicity on him and be like, oh, he was this, he was that. But the reality is we both brought issues to the party and they didn't play nice with each other. So the environment became very toxic because both of the stuff we brought to the party. Then I was traveling a lot of the time, moved to New York, like I said, which chewed me up and spat me out. So I was meant to stay there for a lot longer than I did, but then I came back to the UK. And when I came back to the UK, I ended up in another relationship with the guy that I'm now married to, which was a far healthier relationship from his side. I put him through hell the first 6 months as I continued to work through all my issues at his expense. And he stuck around. So I was like, well, he stuck around for that. It can't get much worse. So may as well marry him. So we got married just over a year ago. So we've been married now for a year, together for 5. And yeah, it really has been a whirlwind of a journey from that perspective. And very early on when we were together is when I decided to stop traveling so much in my old kind of world. And when I was doing a lot of speaking and teaching for Rich Dad internationally, that came with a lot of travel. So I didn't want to travel quite so much. And I'd kind of developed my own skills, my own system for trading, and I wanted to start teaching that. So I thought, right, I'll stop traveling, I'll launch my own thing. And it just that kind of just grew from there and there and there. And even through that, I've had to learn lessons of boundaries. I'm not very good with them. And yes, I want to help people, but they don't get the right to call me every night of the week and all of that sort of thing. I can turn my phone off and put it away, which I'm definitely still learning that lesson because I just want to help people as much as I possibly can. And yeah, the business has just grown and grown and grown. So now I'm very comfortable in who I am, very happy with who I am, wouldn't want to change who I am at all. I know I'm a good person, putting good into the world, and I've got a very good relationship with lots of love, lots of freedom, lots of peace, lots of joy, all of that sort of stuff. And I still get to travel. So my other half is quite happy for me to go away for the weekend by myself, that type of thing, because that's always been who I am. I love going to a new city, getting lost in that city, just pottering around, not knowing where I am, just completely by myself. I really value alone time. Even though I'm very much an extrovert, I need a lot of alone time to be the best extrovert that I can be. So traveling is a great way for me to kind of shut down and do that. And he lets me do that.
Yeah. Do you think this life is as rich as it is now because of all those moments in which you were kind of stifling things and pushing things and focusing on other things? Maybe we turn it into that as you were focused on the mission, right? You were not focused on Lewis. You were just focused on how Lewis could fulfill the mission and continue that on. Do you think that this version of your life now, this richness that you describe, is somewhat weirdly because of some of that?
Yeah. So I love that question. And this is why I love podcasts because they feel like free therapy. And the reason I love that question is I'm still on a mission. I'm still obsessed. And the reason I love that question is it's made me realize that I've just transferred my mission and my behavioral patterns around that mission to what I do now. And I still don't really focus on Lewis anywhere near as much as I should do. And even saying those words out loud makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong,
Mm.
which is maybe partly why my business has grown. And I'm a big fan of a little bit of obsession and focus on mission and things like that. But I do think the richness of my life, my understanding of how rich my life is, the depth of my love and care and passion for other people all comes from the pain and difficulty I've been through in my life. And I don't think I've had as much pain and difficulty as other people. But that is true, but doesn't diminish what I've been through either. And the same for other people doesn't diminish what they've been through. So I like even things like my very bad relationship I had before my current relationship would not change it for the world because it made me a better human being. It made me a more understanding human being. It made me a more compassionate human being. And I can relate so much better to so many more people because of all the difficult things that I've been through in my life. So, yeah, I definitely think I experience richness of life more so now because of all of that stuff. So I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah. What stuck me, and you said I still focused on the mission and not as much on you. But in the long time that I've known you now, it feels like this mission is more you
Yeah.
and less of a mission that someone else dictated for you
Yeah.
in a way. It feels like, and so, and the same like side, maybe on the other side of the coin is like fulfilling this version of your mission is also focused on you in a way because it's filling your heart with the things that you've decided to do versus maybe what you decided to do, but it was in the guardrails of what someone else was kind of giving you. Now you create the road, you create the guardrails, you create all the things, right? Like this is your journey that you're making one day at a time. Like there's no path, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think what the difference is because the mission's always been to change the world. If you bring it down to its basics, it's always been to change the world, to make people's lives better, one person at a time. And how I do that may change. I think the difference is now I can do that fully inhabiting who I am and what I bring to the table. And the more I can inhabit who I am, the more I can be true to myself, the more I actually help people. And so that is a very exciting thing and also a very scary thing sometimes as well. So, yeah,
Yeah, because you don't have the path. Like
no,
the other version of your life, they could dictate exactly what you should do in some way. This way you get to create it. There's
exactly.
the next page is blank and you can do whatever you want with it. But part this is going to sound like the non-religious person that I am. Do you think that mission to change the world, that version of your life in the church, doing what you were doing, do you think there were any things that you were doing because of the church that wasn't necessarily making things better?
Is in for other
This is a
people.
this is a terrible question, but yeah, like in a way, do you feel that because maybe how you feel about religion now versus then, that what you were telling them wasn't necessarily what was serving them? Say a younger version of Lewis knowing his identity and knowing who he truly was and wasn't able to be, and you were coaching him in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. I think the answer is, again, nuanced because on a
It's a terrible question. I apologize, but
it's not a terrible question. It's not a terrible question. I think the reality is people pick things that serve them, whether that serves them in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. We choose those things. Like everything that I did and went through in the church, an element of that I chose. And again, depending on the church context you're in, I was part of a very loving group of people. Everything they did to me, for me, was because they loved me and they wanted the best for me. It's just their perception of best for me wasn't necessarily what was best for me. So I think very much like a parent who's trying to do the best thing for their child because they love them, they don't always make the right call. They don't always make the right choice. So I definitely think when I was in that context, I probably did things for people or encouraged people to do things for themselves, which probably weren't the best thing for them based on what I now believe. But back then, I completely believed it was. And I was saying that from a position of love.
that was a great answer to my super rude question. But I think I think sometimes those of us that have a bad taste for certain things, we feel that way. And I think that was a great example of how parents have the best intentions, but sometimes their best intention isn't what we actually needed at the
Mhm.
time or when we look back on those things. And so thank you for entertaining that question. I didn't want it to sound terrible, but now when I go back and listen to it, I'm sure it will. But I think it's just so lovely to see that you the way you described your teenage years was with happiness and joy because you were leaning into something that you felt super passionate about. But then when those cracks started showing and those kind of things, you were able to find like the 100% version of Lewis and like do the things that you want to do. And I mean, how many people are that quote unquote lucky to find and live in themselves in the way that they want to because they know what the other side was like? Because I think a lot of us are kind of walking like we're sleepwalking in some cases. Like we don't really realize that we could be living bigger and louder and in the ways that we should. Do you see it that way?
Oh, totally. And I think I am always quite keen to not make decisions that will trap me anymore. So I know people who have made certain life choices who that don't align with who they are, but those choices come with such heavy responsibilities, whether that's kids, wife, whatever it may be, that they cannot and will not break that responsibility because they've also made that choice. And that is so honorable, but incredibly tough. Not sure I would be able to make the same choice, to be honest. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that that goes on.
It's
Definitely.
hard because some of those choices that you describe also affect other people. But at
Exactly.
the same time, if they're not honoring themselves, are they giving the best experience to those other people? It's like this chicken or the egg kind of conundrum here in which we don't know what we don't know until we don't know it or until we know it,
Yeah, and
whatever that
I
might
think
be.
with situations like that, there's not really a right answer. Yeah, there's just not really a right answer.
And as far as I know, because I haven't been to the other side yet, but we only have one chance, right? Until we figure out if we have another chance. And so why not sit on that toilet and say, look, this is not serving me. I'm just going to go back to that toilet reference. Thank you for that. But like you sat there and you made a hard choice. You made a really hard choice because of all the shame and the things that come from quitting something or leaving something or letting people down or all the things that we could talk ourselves out of doing it. And you made the choice
Yeah, and it is walking away from a full on identity and perception of who you are in
and
the
a
hope.
perceived future.
Yeah, exactly. In the hope of finding something else that means you don't have to cry yourself to sleep every night. But it is your whole identity. Like that was everything that I was. That's everything I was known for. That is who I yeah, that was my identity. And so stepping away from that was saying, I don't know who I am anymore because this is now all gone.
Yeah. How did your parents respond when you said you were stepping away from that?
I don't think I told them, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that was really part of I wasn't very close to my parents back then because of the separation that was caused. So I just didn't tell them. Yeah.
Would you find a better relationship with them now because of
Yeah.
you living in your fullness?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Would you walk by the red light district if you went on vacation with your
Oh, I'd
parents
go
now?
and wave at the windows and everything now.
Okay.
I'd have a great time. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I love to kind of wrap these conversations up with a question. And I'm wondering if, like, this version of you now, living in your fullness, this rich life that you've created for yourself, in which you can do whatever you want to do that serves other people, but also serves you in the process. If you could go back to that Lewis that was crying himself to sleep every night and talking, is there anything you would want to say to him?
Yeah, I think my I always like to go with just the first thing that comes to my head for these types of things rather than overthink it. But I think the only thing I would either say nothing because I don't want to change my history, or I would just say keep going. That's probably yeah, those are probably the only two options I'd go with.
And you know what? I ask that question a lot just because I think it's interesting to think about, but most people don't have an answer, and most people would not interfere because most people that I talk to have had the time of reflection and the time to look back, like you described, all the pieces that you would not change because they made you this version of Lewis. It's a very weird question for me. Would I go back and change the accident that my knowing who I am now, I wouldn't be this version of me if all that struggle hadn't happened because of
Yeah,
that one event.
yeah,
And so it's a really hard question. The one thing that a lot of people say is they would just give that person a hug because they just needed a hug, to know that someone was listening, someone cared, someone was going to be there for them. So
yeah.
thank you for sharing this story in this way. I don't know if you plan to come on the show
Yeah,
and talk about some of these things, but I think it's just so valuable because at the end of the day, there are people out there that feel just like you did, you know? And maybe this will give them a little bit of a spark of like, oh, I can make the choices for myself that I really truly feel deep down inside that I want to change. No, it's awesome. If people want to get in your circle, your orbit, not call you every day because you don't need that. You need to put your phone away. But if they want to like find you on socials or learn more about your company or anything like that, can you give us some of that information?
Sure. So Instagram's a good place for me. So my Instagram handle, and I am blue ticked because there's a lot of people who pretend to be me for some reason. So it's at with WITH Lewis Crompton LEWIS CROPTON, or you can go to www.lewiscrompton.com, and if you want to drop me an email, you can do that through there.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll have all those easy links for people in the show notes. That way they can just click on it and do what they need to do. But if something that Lewis said today resonated with you, I'm sure he would love a little
Yeah,
message about it to hear your story. Or maybe you know somebody in your life that needs to hear this story or needs to hear an example of a story that they might be experiencing in themselves. We'd love it if you would share this episode with them, because I think the more we can build community like you do with your company, but just in general, the more that we're in community with each other, the more we can grow, the more we can learn, the more we can love, all the things that come along with it. So we would love for you to share however you're feeling with whoever you're feeling it with. If it resonates with you, reach out to Lewis. That would be awesome. Would you be okay with that?
yeah, I'd love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing your story, sharing your personal journey to get to where you are. I know we didn't talk much about your company, but they can find out about
They
that.
can
I think
find out.
this
Yeah.
this this colors so much of someone's life, and I think that it's just so important to share. So, thank you for being willing to do so.
Thank you for having me.
If you are listening and you enjoyed this, please do a little rating and review. I would love that. And that's all I'm going to say. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode of the Life Shift podcast. Thanks again, Lewis. For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. Hey everyone. I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. I am just dropping this special little clip into all the episodes. So, no matter what episode you're listening to, this is actually pretty current as of July 2024. I wanted to come on here and just say a big thank you to Earworthy, because the Life Shift podcast was just named the best overall podcast of the year in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. And you've probably seen some articles written about the Life Shift podcast before, written by Earworthy. And now he is launching, from his online publication, he is launching these yearly winners of independent podcast awards. And these are specifically for indie podcasters. We are those that wear all the hats. We create the show. Some people write the show. We're producers, sound engineers. We troubleshoot all the tech. We do any kind of research if we need to. We host the shows. We distribute the shows. We do all the things that relate to our shows because we love it. And it's so nice to see my name in a list with some other amazing podcasts like Multispective, which won Best Life Lessons Podcast. Salad with a Side of Fries won Best Health Podcast. Bippity Boppity Business won Best Business Advice Podcast. And there are so many more. And so I just want to come on here and say thank you to Earworthy for not only doing these awards every year and just honoring some of us indie podcasters that sometimes feel like we're just shouting into the void, but we're not. We're just doing what brings us joy, and hopefully through that work it brings other people joy. In my case, for the Life Shift, I hope that each episode finds the ears that needed to hear it the most, so that they feel a little less alone in their circumstance. But also, Earworthy writes all these amazing publications pretty much weekly, every week, every weekday, I should say, where he writes on Blogger, Medium, Substack, Tumblr, Vocal, Many Stories, and for other places. And he really just highlights the independent podcasters. So thank you, Frank, for everything you do with Earworthy and for recognizing all of us in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. If you'd like to read more, please head to medium.com/EAR hyphen WORTHY. Thanks again and enjoy this episode.